Super excited for this video tour, guys. I've come up to a beautiful garden in Raleigh with a person you may have seen. He has a YouTube channel. This is, you want to introduce yourself,
Sure.
Bryce?
Hi, I'm Bryce Lane, and I am what would you call me, a semi-retired professor from NC State University in the Department of Horticultural Science. I've taught there for over 40 years, still teaching part-time, but in the meantime, I'm a part-time gardener, so I'm out here a lot.
Yeah, and this is a beautiful space. You guys are going to be blown away by it. And I had seen it. You'd shot a couple videos during COVID, during the lockdown of it. And
right.
Yeah, and then we've missed one another occasionally, but we ran into each other a few weeks ago, and I was like, yes, we finally get to go to Bryce's garden. So you're similar to us. You're a bit of a plant collector.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're doing the drifts of one where we're trying to figure out how to work.
When I first started teaching at State, I taught plant identification, and I taught that for over 27 years, and that was, in ornamentals. I love plants. I got my start in a garden center, working and selling plants. So the idea of when we first bought our first property, the idea was, okay, I'm going to start bringing as many different plants in as I can. I had zero landscaping experience, no training whatsoever. So what you're about to see is more of a trial and error, learning as you go kind of thing. But I got lots of plants, just not a whole lot of ideas. But it's starting to work now for me.
Oh, it looks fantastic. Thanks. What are your some of your favorites? Well, let's talk about the wall. First of all, the retaining wall has to be pointed out, Steph, if you can show. We're going to see this wall go all the way around. How did you obtain these stones?
Well, the story's kind of funny. My wife and I, when we bought the house, we had two small children, and it was a little 3-bedroom starter home. Yeah. As they got to be teenagers, we needed to expand, so we added on this sunroom. Yeah. And the sunroom required a fair amount of money, and the contractor, let me do some sweat equity. And one of the first things he asked me to do was to go ahead and dig the foundation. I said, well, I know how to dig.
Yeah,
right? So first shovel goes in, and I hit rock.
Yeah.
And Jim, I'm not kidding, every single rock in this retaining wall came out of that hole.
So you did, that was some serious sweat equity.
Oh my gosh, it took me weeks to dig the hole, and then it took me even longer to build the retaining wall. But I had a grade change, and with the sunroom coming out, it worked out great. The only thing I did was hire a guy to come in and with a bobcat and cut into the grade, and then it took me about 3 months to build the wall. But that was 1992, so this wall has been intact. No repairs, and it's a wonderful backdrop to be able to create layers in my landscape.
Yeah, I wish we had more of that, because we are just deadpan. Right. We're deadpan flat. So the boxwood here is unraveled?
Yes, it is. I've got 2 on my property. This one I'm kind of training. My idea was to put a stake and keep training it upwards, kind of a little topiary thing there. And then I've got one over around the corner that's on the wall that just drapes on over. It's one of my favorite plants.
It's such an interesting plant. And they're at the entrance there at the Ralston. And every time I see one, I'm like, I don't know how we haven't gotten one yet, but it's a great boxwood. Tell us about your screen here.
Well, my next door neighbor never gardened for years, and then he's lived there since '88, and one day he comes over to the house and he says he wants to be a gardener. So I call him a born-again gardener, and so one of the first projects we worked on together was creating kind of like this arbor. We had, thank you, J.C. Ralston, we had Leyland cypress here, and then the ice storm in 2001 turned them into cabbages. Right. So we took them out, and we wanted to have some kind of vertical, vertical presence here that would also create a little bit of an informal screen. And so he and I designed this arbor with 4x6s and
that's what I was
plumber's pipe, and we put the arbor in. You can't see it now because it's 20 years old. And then we put schizophragma, climbing hydrangea, cross vine, let's see what else, chocolate vine. We just threw a bunch of vines in there and let them duke it out. And so this is the result of that. And it serves us both on either side, and yet also creates more of a vertical aspect in this area of the garden, which works out really well.
When your neighbor started gardening, you've helped him, and now your garden just kind of merged together a bit.
It's fascinating when you I call it the neighborhood effect, right? So, you start gardening and your neighbors come out and they start looking. Well, Dan and I just started talking about, you know, different things, and we go to big bloomers every spring.
Right,
we go
yeah.
at least one time, and you know, it's interesting. You think two people gardening side by side, the gardens would look somewhat similar, but
Right.
you know, his style and his personality comes out in what he picks, and we share
Yeah.
plants and whatnot. And then what's so great is we have such a good relationship that, you know, the idea of a fence or a barrier doesn't happen. And so a lot of people don't know where my property stops and where his starts, and you know, like this Ogon Spiraea and that miniature limelight there, they're his plants.
Oh, right.
But I'm taking advantage of them as a backdrop for my Menard. And this area is real sunny, and we try to do cut flowers in the summertime in our house.
Right.
And so I'm putting zinnias in here, and people are like, "Oh, that was a great idea that you put those things in there." It's like, I didn't put them in there. My neighbor did. It's like, well, did you consult with them? It's like, no, we just go after it, and we, like I said, we share things, and it's a real good relationship, and that makes gardening all the more fun.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of rare. And most people are
It
trying
is
to put, like, let me see what border I can put between the, I really like Ogon Spiraea, and we just don't see it out in the world as much as it should be. I mean, it's like most of the Spiraeas we see. I mean, this one continues to show off.
Yes, it does, even after it's flowered, which is one of the earliest bloomers. And what I find, what's so great about Ogon is that it's one of my wife's favorite plants, because every year it's going to flower, no matter where you put it in your yard, whether it's full sun, partial. You know, it's one of those what I call time-tested plants, and it just performs really well. And so I'm thrilled that he planted it there, and I've had it in my garden at different times, taken it out, I'll put it back in, that kind of thing.
Right, and I think it's one of those plants that gets a little bit rough in a container. I couldn't present it perfect except for like the week or two it was leafing out.
Exactly.
And then I think people pass on it,
right?
You know, on the table.
Hard one. It would be a hard one to market just because it's got such a short window of flowers. And of course,
right, exactly.
People are buying plants for their flowers.
Exactly. You've got a good mix of conifers.
I do. Try to.
Yeah, here and there, and that's something that we've tried to do as well, is incorporate and try to pass that along to others at your garden.
This one of my favorites, Blue Star Juniper.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, right.
And
so many of them.
I just don't have a lot. I'm running out of full sun, Jim. So I'm trying to, you know, strategically locate them. I also love Cryptomeria too. Some of the smaller Cryptomerias.
Right. Yeah, Steph's got one right behind her. As she's filming. Tell us about the Caryopteris.
Caryopteris, I think that one's Worcester Gold. Great yellow foliage in the early spring. What I'm noticing about this year, and maybe it's because we had such a mild June, is that it's holding its yellow. You know, it usually a lot of times it greens up quickly when it gets hot, and it's a great plant. It's going to flower from now all the way into the fall, and then married with the Allium Millennium, I get all kinds of pollinators on it. In fact, you can see there's a bumblebee. I'm sleeping it off on the top of that that allium there.
Yeah, and that's another plant I'd like to point out that on that Caryopteris is another one that I had a difficult time growing in a nursery and have it look good all the time in a pot.
Right.
Like in the ground, look at it. So if you see that plant, even if it's not perfect in a container, I'd grab that plant. Well, it's just it's such a great fall pollinator plant.
And it grows like a weed too. And that's, you know, to your point, it may look really questionable, but understand that once you get it in the ground and get it going, it just takes off. It's, you know, always putting on new growth.
What's your Japanese maple that's...
So this one here, okay, so I've got, of course, there are two cut leaves that get confused. There's Viridis and Waterfall. And so I wasn't sure whether this was Viridis or Waterfall. Thought this one was Waterfall, so over next to the Ruby Falls Redbud, I've got Viridis. So now I know that one of them's Viridis, the other one's Waterfall, but this one's been in this spot for well over 20 years. And it is taking up a huge amount of real estate. And I keep telling my wife, you know, maybe it's time to take that out. That'll give us some more full sun. And she's like, don't you dare. I mean, it really is an anchor point, you know, bones of the landscape kind of thing. It's really a nice anchor point. And it creates a little bit of mystery when people come walking up the path. It's like, what's around on the other side?
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so JC always had two Japanese maples you could see at the Arboretum wherever you stood. And so I just stole that idea when I started planting plants. But for me, it's at least three. From wherever you're standing in the property, you can see at least three Japanese maples. Yeah.
And he's referencing J.C. Ralston, and the emblem for the Ralston Arboretum is a maple leaf.
Right, exactly.
You have a great mixture of ferns and other ground covers out here.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, it's kind of happenstance. I started planting ferns against this north wall. Because it barely sees the light, the sun any time. But contrary to popular belief, and I don't know that a lot of home gardeners know this, but ferns volunteer like crazy.
Yeah, right.
So all the ferns along the wall are all volunteers. And
oh, really?
You know, and I maintain sometimes volunteers know where they belong in the landscape more so than we gardeners. And so, yeah, those ferns are there. I learned a principle from a landscape designer who always said, people always like to have things on the wall that cascade down, like the Muehlenbeckia here, and it comes down over, and that's all fine and good. But she said one of the better ways to approach a retaining wall like this is to create a little bit more three-dimensionality by planting plants down at the base of the wall as well. So you get that kind of, you know, you wouldn't see that kind of interaction between the fern and the wire plant right there. And then again, volunteers. Jim, this little patch right here, that's all Evita gloxinia,
right? Yeah.
That somehow got planted there from the other garden over on the other side.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure it out. I thought, volunteers, I've never seen it seed, never seen a fruit on the dang thing. But you know, they create these little tubers. And the squirrels go and dig these tubers up. And so this little area right here is squirrel planted. But it's fantastic because in the fall when it's in full red flower, it's just stunning and it really draws people in. So yeah, I kind of plan things and then let the volunteers take over.
Your dry shade is probably reining these in a hair. I mean, the ferns, but we've seen ferns go completely weedy.
Yes.
I mean, like really over the top. So you have the great use of ground covers, and we talk about this, ground covers, and then you've got your herbaceous perennials, shrubs, trees, all the way up to your oak. And tell us a story about this oak.
So this oak over here in the corner is actually a child of a larger oak. We had an oak tree in our backyard pre-Hurricane Fran, 1996. That was 100 feet tall and 100 feet wide. And so in essence, our whole backyard was full shade.
Wow.
And then when Fran hit, it knocked that big oak over, and I went to full sun. And then one day I'm out in the back area of the garden, just on the edge of my property, and I see this little oak seedling. I'm 100% convinced that that's a child of the oak we lost.
Right.
And now look. And I figure by the time my wife and I leave this house, we're going to be back to full shade again.
But that's only 29 years.
Yes.
It's got perfect structure. It really
it's
is
amazing. I've done a little bit of maintenance pruning underneath, but it is a beautiful, beautiful tree. And just the idea of cutting it down for the sake of full sun, I just can't do it because you know, white oaks, native, they're so supporting of the pollinators, a lot of caterpillars and whatnot. Plus, I love that tree. I love the white oak. It's one of my favorite.
It's one of my favorite, and you can garden with it. It's one of those things I try to get through. You cannot garden with a red maple. Right. A red maple will be out to kill everything you have.
Exactly.
That thing will, negotiate.
Exactly.
And at least allow some.
Well, and I've got all kinds of things underneath that get a little bit of morning sun now, afternoon. That heat in the afternoon they're spared. Yeah. And so I'm learning about more semi-shade tolerant plants as this oak continues to expand.
Well, come on around, Steph, and we'll look at a little more of your wall. Are you mostly have herbaceous perennials, but you've got some annuals that you.
I do. So this is the sunniest area, and about 3 years ago, my wife said she wants more cut flowers in the house, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to just start doing zinnias because they're easy and they produce black-eyed Susans. I got the Gerber daisies in containers because somehow they grow better for me in containers than they do in the garden. Don't ask me why. David Phlox is probably my favorite Phlox perennial, and so that's here every year as well. But neighbors will come over and say, we want to see what you're doing in this area, because I always change it up. Yeah. The hummingbird mints, those are all volunteers from which I have no clue where they came from. I do get the one in the foreground is the yellow cultivar, yellow leaf cultivar. Yeah. But a lot of the larger ones that you see are just volunteers. And they're pollinator magnets, so I keep them.
Oh yeah,
I love them.
Those bees,
now
they're
a horrible cut flower, but nonetheless.
This wall really created this terracing effect,
It did.
and we can see down. I've got different angles. We'll have Steph shoot some B-roll down in there. You can see different angles because of the.
Well, I learned a principle a long time ago is if you want to invite people into your garden, you got 3 things you can do. 1, create choice. 2, create curiosity. Right. And 3, put curves into the landscape.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so, as you come by that arbor, you can take the high road or the low road,
Yeah.
right? So you've got choice there. And then by having that curve, you can't really see what's around the corner. And so I see people wanting, they kind of, they try to pick a place to go and they come. But and a lot of folks never make it up here, and this is one of my favorite areas because of the different perspectives that you have.
Yeah, and then you have this kind of another block on your next row where you've stepped up annuals, perennials, shrubs, and then what's over there? What's over there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because I have such a small property, trying to blur my border so people wouldn't feel kind of cramped in. And so, by creating this kind of natural border with the small Japanese maples and then the larger trees in the background, it serves that purpose.
Your paths are pine straw.
Yes.
What are you using for mulch in the beds?
So being that I've gardened here for 40 years and been building my soils for that long, I will put a half an inch of soil conditioner on in the springtime.
Okay, so that's pine bark.
Just pine bark fines, and I do that, Jim, more for soil building than I do for mulch.
Yeah.
I'll do hand weeding, as you can see by the time it gets to here, biological control for weeds, and the pine straw has just been one of those it's a soft.
It is.
I
like
great
it.
color combination. I thought about putting gravel in one year, or that the permeable stone like out at the Arboretum through the Japanese garden, and it just would. I think it would feel a lot colder. So I do pine straw, and it works great.
Right.
Probably got some great compost underneath. I've been doing it so many years.
Yeah, and we've stolen from Juniper Level Botanic Garden. We use wood chips in our paths, which has the same
feel,
stushy feel, and also I'm getting the water in the ground. I don't want any kind of solid material. I want this water
to get in the soil.
I feel like this is all right. So this perennial board, this is the end of your kind of full sun space that was created by that old tree being taken down, and now you're losing. You're adapting back. So
I am.
So just we talked about this before we turned on the camera. Explain, in the 40 years you've been here, you've had to evolve. Several times, and people will have to evolve. Yes.
Well, I don't know that a lot of home gardeners that are beginners really understand the idea that a garden is just like a human life. It goes through a number of different iterations that require some pivoting. And I've learned, having been in the same spot for 40 years, that what I thought was going to be permanent, guess what? It's not. And I've had to learn how to reevaluate the conditions that I have, and light environment is a really important one. This Japanese maple here in the patio I planted 25 years ago, and it was 3 feet tall. And I remember my daughter's boyfriend at the time, he's now my son-in-law, told me, he said, you're gonna be really old by the time that gives you any shade on the patio, right? And so now we come out here and have dinner, and I say to my son-in-law, it's like, not only am I really old, but you're really old too. But there's so it's worked, but it's created a lot more shade, and I've had to adjust accordingly. But for me, that's what I love about gardening, is that pivoting that you have to do.
Yeah, I feel like I'm planting the trees permanently, and I'm planting the shrubs for about 20 years. I do have a 20-year evaluation on a woody shrub.
I think
at the end of 20
valuable.
years, it's either getting cut to the ground, or it's probably going out. And then the perennials are probably 5 years. You know what I mean? Like in my mind now, I've done this for so long, I kind of know about their lasting. Yeah.
Now you're a gardener after my own heart, because you just said they're going to get cut to the ground or they're out. And so there's a difference between those things. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, hey, you can cut a shrub to the ground and it'll come back and give you some more years of
possibly
performance.
I'll say it to people in consultation. You can give it one more chance.
Exactly.
And just off with its head.
Very good.
You got so many things out here. Let's just talk about some of your absolute favorites.
Okay, so Jim, to answer your question, honestly, I'd have to tell you that my favorite plants this week are, a lot of people always ask, what are my favorite plants? It's like, well, this week, these are my favorites, but I do have some go-tos. The Japanese maples, I love the Japanese maples, and like we talked about, Viridis and Waterfall. The one here in front of me may not look very good right now in the middle of July, but in the springtime, it's bright red. It's a dwarf bloodgood called Rhode Island Red, and it is stunning. Now that plant right there is about 25 years old, and it's just barely 6.5 feet tall. So that's wonderful. And if you look behind it, you'll see a pretty good sized tree. That's Chionanthus retusus, the Chinese fringe tree. Number one small tree on my list. If somebody asks me what's a great small tree for the home landscape, Chionanthus retusus, the Chinese fringe tree is all, I'm all over it. It is covered in pure white flowers middle of April, and I love the architecture. It's got really beautiful exfoliating bark as well, ridge and furrowed bark. Great tree. Some of the smoke bushes, great plants. This is a Winecraft black. This is one of the new introductions from my colleague Tom Rainey. And what I love about that is the more I cut it back, the bigger the leaves get and the more bright red you'll see the foliage. And so it creates a nice contrast as well. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't point to Ruby Falls Redbud, because this one was planted here in 2012. I got it from Denny Werner shortly after he released it. And so this shows that the plant has longevity, and it's taken me it's taking way more room than I ever expected it to. But I'm not upset about that. It's a gorgeous redbud, and of course I'm a big redbud fan, probably because I'm a big Denny Werner fan who's created Golden Falls, Flamethrower, and a bunch of others too. So yeah, just a few of the plants that I'm high on now. But ask me tomorrow, I might tell you some different ones.
Beautiful texture in this garden, but you have voles out here, and so these hosta that look like they're in the ground
they're all in containers. Mm-hmm. So, and it's interesting because, at first I thought, well, people see the containers, but that's the only way I'm going to have hosta. Mm-hmm. But because this is such a nice shady location, and I've got holly fern and I've got sensitive fern that are in the ground and some hellebores. So I just plopped these hostas in containers down in there, and magic happened. I can't take credit for it. It just worked out really well. And then that's Annabelle Hydrangea, and she even does well in a pretty shady location. So it's just kind of a good little. I've got a small hosta collection. Maybe I'll grow it more, but each one's got to be in a container.
You got you got vole issues, but overall, it doesn't appear you're you're not spraying. You're not.
No.
Life is happening.
Voles. I got rabbits. Oh, I got rabbits so bad.
Yeah, we do.
A few years ago, Dan, underneath his garden shed, he had a fox family. We had no rabbits. It was great for 2 years, no rabbits at all. But they're back, and I'll spray rabbit repellent from time to time. But what I find is the later into the summer you get, the less they're interested in, because everything gets tough and not flavorful. Yeah. People always ask about deer. Oh man. I've had deer in the garden, but typically they stay in the park. Mm-hmm. The park behind my house is Millbrook Exchange Park, and there's just not a lot of deer pressure coming in this. And now that we've talked about it, they'll probably come and ravage me. But I'm grateful for that. But I just try to work with what I have and come up with, more cultural solutions.
Yeah. Steph, as you turned away, I'm going to have you turn back. The Annabelle, what I like about Hydrangea arborescens is after they finished peak color, it still looks like it's flowering.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. It's such a great plant. Native. And underused for so long.
Totally underused. I totally agree.
Yeah, and really Tom's work, with the proven, the ones that have come out in the Proven Winners line has gotten people's attention on a plant that should have had plenty of attention.
Exactly.
Without it. So your Golden Falls is a little different than ours?
Yeah, it is. Denny Werner gave me this Golden Falls. It was a damaged plant. It was grafted at the base, and it had 2 inches of Golden Falls on a seedling. Yeah. And he said, well, you go ahead and see if you can save it. So I stuck a stake in the container, and I trained it for a couple of years. I got it about waist high, and I thought, I kind of like that.
Yeah, I kind of like it like this.
So, and I had an idea that I was going to put it at this kind of junction, right? Yeah. And then the Ralston Allspice behind it, it's such a vigorous plant that I'm happy that I chose for this to be short, because the combination is pretty cool. And then in the spring, when the allspice is flowering, you get that burgundy mauve color against the yellow leaves. It's a nice combination.
The flowers on this one are quite big.
They are.
And compared to other Calycanthus, it's a very large flower. Not fragrant, but the color, and then the shape of this thing is really...
But it in full sun, even in a shady location, I'd say it's a weed.
It's a vigorous plant.
It's a let's put it this way. It's enthusiastic. But yeah, so yeah, it's a nice combination, at least for now.
We were just talking about all of your colleagues who we've had Denny Werner on the channel, and I hope to have Tom Rainey on at some point, and others. You guys just had an amazing group at the university.
It was
together.
It was a real special recipe of people that all had the student's best interest at hand. Yeah. And even though we had different levels of expertise and perspective, there was a level of respect and care. Everybody's heart was in the right place when it came to educating. It was a real special time, and I feel really privileged to have been part of that. And it was even the early years included J.C. Ralston, which to have him as a mentor and a colleague was prety special.
Having some of these mentors and teachers that I've been lucky enough to film, J.C.'s name comes up in every one of them.
Isn't that something?
I mean, there's not a single video I've ever shot, with folks all over the country. It doesn't matter where I go. JC's name is going to come up. He was such an influence on ornamental horticulture and the way we think about sharing plants.
Exactly.
That's the biggest thing. Is like, this plant, because it's here in your garden, it's protected somewhere.
Right.
That was the vision, was to make sure that these plants are protected, and we can, maybe there's a cure in this, maybe there's a something in this. Yep. Get them protected.
And it really, one of JC's greatest gifts was the way that he promoted plants. The way he promoted plants is he'd reach down and say, "Here, take this," and there were no strings attached. I couldn't tell you how many different plants in this garden were JC gave me that plant. I mean, now Edgeworthia, for example, he introduced me to Edgeworthia before anybody was even selling Edgeworthia. Now I grow it, I propagate it, I give it to people. So it's that kind of mindset that is really, really quite fascinating.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is a beautiful, beautiful garden. Thank you so much for having us up here, and it's been on my list. You've been it's been on my list. It's like Steph, I knew had been in your class. Like, how are we going to get up to Bryce's garden? Bryce's garden's beautiful.
Well, I appreciate y'all coming. I'm honored that you're here, and please come back anytime, and we can talk more about what you see. And I look forward to coming and seeing your garden.
Yes, definitely. You're welcome.